language of 2AC, spectrality, ableism, anthro. The question will always be coming down to how me and Nancy survive. It is a question of indigenous survival, and by indigenous survival, we're not just talking about our bodily corporealities or being able to survive. We're talking about our connection to the land, our connection to being, our connection to our ancestors, our connection to the trees and the ancestors in them. All right. So that is a life that we're talking about, not just bare life. See. They say that there would be a threat of loss, but we say that shit is not unique. That that is only the colonizers saying you're not dead yet. The Mignola evidence is saying that the imposition of the European Western Canada thought that says we're not dead, but we're saying Rodriguez specific on this evidence that we are already dead. We are walking in genocide. Every second, every way we turn, it is genociding us. It must always start at the question of how it must. All right. They don't start at the question of how. They start at the relation to land. That is that's what Western knowledge always misses, right? That means indigenous knowledge is key to our survival because when they don't focus on us, they just subsume natives into racial categories. It's a form of colonization and inter performance of colonization of our bodies. See, what specters they say.
Impact.
And that get rid of the spiritual connection of indigenous knowledge, the capacity of indigenous knowledge for spiritual relation to the earth, and that's what's helping us survive. We are not specters, we're already targets. So evisceration, that's what Rodriguez is talking about. All right, now on to ableism. All right. So it's again, what does their alternative do for? It's a question of what they do for indigenous survival. They see what it comes down to is their blind spot argument. But what we are saying is that this being blind is in indigenous knowledge is literal and spiritual. It is one and the same. These distinctions that they're drawing, it was Mikosha is saying that is disability studies is colonial. Those distinctions those distinctions are violent because it's imposing that indigenous knowledge don't already know these kinds of things. That colonial knowledge imposition is our epistemic death, which is to say our literal death. What are you doing for indigenous survival? That's what we're saying. Our performances of how we are being spiritual acknowledge that it's not just blindness in literal sense, but it's like how we actually embody evisceration. That is the all right. So what Mikosha is saying in this context, the process of disabling has to be seen as a total dehumanizing process and must include the destruction of physical, the emotional, psychic, economic, and cultural life. That is what we're talking about as life. They're just saying life as in like bare life, but that only mystifies our current death because when they see that we're living, they say that we're not dead. Okay, and they're missing the specifics of Mikosha code. They say that says that they impose their Western conceived discourse of ableism onto indigenous knowledge systems, which is a form of intellectual colonization. That means that the act is a prerequisite because you need indigenous discourse of ableism. The colony paved the way for our disabling diseases for the native, against the natives. That is why we should focus on indigenous knowledge, because this form of healing is what will help indigenous people survive. This connection to the earth is what will will help me and Nancy survive. All right, on to the anthro shit. All right.
The language and round.
Right. Also in the language and round that there's. By the way, the Lawrence and Dua evidence is specific that the language is our survival. You're still a settler here. Understand that. They have conceded the Western canon thought argument the Mignola is getting to. Okay. There are colonizers, even in their rhetoric, telling us what disability is. Their language offends you? Well, this language is genociding us. That's what we're saying. They severed the connection of disability. We can't live wholly. That's whole. That's it. Whole. To with our mother. That's what Mikosha is saying.
Right.
Alright, they don't, to Anthro, they don't get it. Our performance of spirituality is not just identity. Don't let them tie us down to whiteness. It's beyond that. It's not just identity. What's in the 2AC is that debate rounds do matter. It's an extension of the world. But the starting point must be indigenous knowledge because it has already resolved the question question of relationship to non-sentient beings before the colonizer said that this is your problem too. They have not understood that we we have already surrendered to our mother. When I say that I feel like shit when I see my ancestors planted in parking lots and they just say those are just trees, that's fine. That means that the tree I see is my ancestor, not just living, but actually like that tree is my ancestor. I came from that tree. That tree nourishes my food. It gives me life. That's what I mean. And their impact of ecological destruction is non-unique because that form of ecological destruction already came with the colonization of the land with the concrete laid over me. And it's not just ontological. Senator Lawrence and dual evidence, it says that this is our ontological, epistemological, cosmological relation to the land, to all the creatures in here. Right? They're just trying to, cross-bar Mignolo evidence, it says that you're just posing your colonial relation to our mother onto us as an end-round act of colonization that severs our spirituality that we already had with the mother. They're trying to say that we have this problem when we do not. They're just saying this because they live in our home, and because they live in our home, they call it their home, because we're in it, they think it's our problem too. That is the in-round act of colonization, this colonial genocide, severing our indigenous knowledge from us by disregarding our actual connection to the earth, literally, spiritually, epistemologically, cosmologically. That's all one and the same.
No, the Lawrence Institute piece of evidence is specific on how it's ontological, epistemological, and cosmological, which is to say that entirety of the oneness isn't talking about our perspective, it's talking about a cosmological perspective.
Yeah, it's talking about
a universal perspective about the world.
It's the entire world.
That's why starting with indigenous knowledge is key. We have to talk about what is indigenous survival. Indigenous survival isn't our literal beings. It's a survival of our knowledge, a survival of the spirits, and survival of our ancestors and the trees. Right.
And by not starting in that, you sever that connection, you sever that understanding, and by doing that, you take away our life.